A personal item dropped. The CEO picked it up. She chose to hide the truth. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The hallway was quiet, in that way office buildings get just before the day officially begins. The lights hummed softly. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and printer ink. She walked fast, head slightly down, one hand gripping her bag, the other holding her phone with unread messages stacked like unpaid bills. Then it happened. Something slipped from her bag and hit the floor with a light, unmistakable sound. She froze. Before she could turn back, a man bent down and picked it up. He was tall, calm, dressed simply. No rush, no noise, just presence. He held the item between his fingers, looked at it once, then lifted his eyes. "Who does this belong to?" he asked. The question was gentle, neutral, almost careless, but her heart slammed so hard she felt it in her throat. For a second, the hallway seemed too bright, too quiet. Every possible answer rushed through her mind at once. If she told the truth, it would raise questions. If she raised questions, people would look closer. And if people looked closer, everything she had worked so hard to keep hidden could fall apart. She swallowed. "That is not mine," she said. The words came out smoothly, too smoothly. The man nodded once, as if accepting the answer without judgment. He handed the item to the receptionist nearby and said nothing more. No lecture, no suspicion, just a brief pause, and then he walked away down the corridor. She stood there, breath shallow, watching his back disappear around the corner. She did not know it yet, but the man who had picked up that small personal item was the chief executive officer of the company, and the lie she had just told was the first test. Minutes later, she was at her desk, trying to focus on her screen. Numbers blurred together. Emails chimed and stacked, but her mind replayed the moment again and again. The sound of the item hitting the floor, the calm tone of his voice, the ease with which she had denied the truth. She had not lied because she was careless. She had lied because she was afraid. Afraid of being seen as less than. Afraid of being judged for where she came from. Afraid that one honest sentence could undo years of effort, late nights, and quiet sacrifices no one ever noticed. Around her, co-workers laughed and chatted about weekend plans. Someone complained about traffic on the interstate. Someone else mentioned a delayed flight. Normal conversations, normal lives. She straightened her posture and forced herself to breathe. It was over, she told herself. A small moment, a harmless lie, nothing more. Down the hall, behind a closed office door, the man who had picked up the item placed his briefcase on the table and paused. He remembered her face, the way her shoulders tensed, the half-second of fear before she answered. He had not asked the question to accuse anyone. He had asked it to listen, and from that single answer, he had learned far more than she realized. Because in a company filled with resumes, titles, and polished smiles, character was revealed in moments like these. Quiet moments, ordinary moments, moments when no one thought they were being tested. And this story had only just begun. She tried to tell herself that nothing had changed, that it was just another morning at work, another ordinary day in a building full of people who barely noticed her. She opened her email, adjusted her chair, and focused on the screen in front of her. But her body told a different story. Her shoulders stayed tight, her jaw clenched without her realizing it. Every sound in the office felt sharper than usual. She kept seeing the item in her mind, the way it had slipped from her bag, the way it had landed on the floor like a small betrayal. She had carried it with her for years, not because it was valuable, but because it reminded her of who she had been before life taught her to stay quiet. She had promised herself that this job would be different, that she would keep her head down, do the work, and never give anyone a reason to look too closely. No one here needed to know how close she had come to losing everything. No one needed to know how many doors had closed before this one finally opened. At lunch, she ate alone at her desk. She usually did. It was easier that way. Less explaining, less pretending. Across the office, a group of co-workers laughed about a meeting that had gone long. Someone mentioned the chief executive officer by name, joking about how calm he always seemed, even when everyone else was panicking. Her stomach tightened. She had not known who he was in the hallway. She had seen him before, of course, everyone had. But out of context, without the conference room or the title or the attention of others, he had just been another man passing through. And that was what scared her most. He had not looked powerful. He had looked observant. Later that afternoon, an email went out asking for volunteers to assist with a short internal review project. It was nothing glamorous, extra hours, extra responsibility, the kind of work people avoided. Her first instinct was to ignore it. Drawing attention to herself had never ended well. But then she remembered the lie. Not the words themselves, but how easy they had been to say. How fear had decided for her before she had time to think. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. If she stayed invisible, she would stay safe. But she would also stay exactly where she was, forever apologizing to herself for what she did not dare to become. She signed up. The next day, she was called into a small conference room with a handful of others. The air felt heavier there, more serious. Papers were neatly stacked on the table. When the door opened and he walked in, the room went quiet without anyone asking it to. The chief executive officer greeted everyone politely, then took a seat at the head of the table. His eyes moved from face to face, calm and unreadable. When they landed on her, they paused just long enough for her to notice. Not recognition, not accusation, recognition of something else. The meeting began. He asked simple questions, clear questions, questions that required honesty more than confidence. One by one, people answered carefully, saying what they thought he wanted to hear. When it was her turn, her voice almost failed her. She could lie again. No one would know. Instead, she spoke plainly. She admitted what she did not understand. She explained what she had observed. She took responsibility for a small mistake that no one else had mentioned. The room stayed silent. Then he nodded. "Thank you," he said. "That is exactly the kind of answer we need." Something shifted inside her, just slightly, enough to notice. After the meeting, as people filed out, she gathered her papers slowly, hoping to leave unnoticed. She almost made it to the door when his voice stopped her. "Please stay for a moment." Her heart raced, but she turned back. He waited until the room was empty. Then he spoke, not as a superior, but as someone genuinely curious. "Fear makes good people hide," he said calmly, "but it also reveals who they really are." He did not mention the hallway. He did not mention the item. Not yet. She nodded, unsure what to say. As she left the room, her hands were shaking. But for the first time since the lie, the fear felt different. Less like a threat, more like a warning that the truth was catching up. And when it did, she had no idea whether it would save her or cost her everything. The days that followed moved forward, but something underneath them had changed. She noticed it in small ways first. The way people listened more carefully when she spoke. The way her emails were answered faster than before. The way her name began to appear on meeting invites she would never have been included in just weeks ago. None of it felt accidental. She worked harder than ever, arriving early and staying late, double-checking every detail before turning anything in. Not because she wanted recognition, but because she could not afford another mistake. The lie in the hallway still lived in her chest, quiet but heavy, like a secret waiting for the wrong moment to surface. One evening, long after most of the office had emptied, she found herself alone in the break room. The vending machines hummed softly. Outside the windows, the city lights glowed against the dark. She leaned against the counter and finally let herself breathe. That was when she heard footsteps. She turned, expecting a security guard or a late working analyst. Instead, it was him. The chief executive officer stood in the doorway, jacket draped over his arm, sleeves rolled slightly at the wrists. Without the formality of meetings or the attention of others, he looked almost ordinary again. "Working late," he said. "Yes," she replied. "I wanted to finish reviewing the numbers from this morning." He nodded. "That project matters. You handled it well." The compliment caught her off guard. Praise from him was rare. Praise directed at her felt unreal. "Thank you," she said quietly. There was a pause, not uncomfortable, not rushed, just space. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and placed something on the counter between them. Her breath stopped. It was the item from the hallway, clean, undamaged, exactly where it had been before it fell. "I believe this belongs to you," he said calmly. For a moment, the room felt too small. She stared at it, her mind racing. He knew. Of course he knew. He had always known. The lie had never fooled him. It had only delayed this moment. "I am sorry," she said finally. Her voice was steady, even though her hands were not. "I should not have lied." "I know," he replied. She waited for consequences, for disappointment, for judgment. Instead, he leaned back slightly and crossed his arms. "Do you know why I did not call you out that morning?" he asked. She shook her head. "Because honesty given under pressure is more valuable than honesty given safely," he said. "I wanted to see who you were when it mattered." She swallowed. "And what did you see?" He looked at her carefully before answering. Someone who was afraid, but also someone who corrected herself the moment she was given the chance. Her eyes burned, but she did not look away. "I was afraid of losing this job," she admitted. "It means everything to me." "I know," he said. "That is why you are still here." He slid the item back toward her. She picked it up slowly, as if it might disappear. "There will be another review soon," he continued. "A public one. People will be watching more closely. I will not protect you from that." She nodded. "I understand. But," he added, "I will judge you by your actions, not your past." He left the room a moment later, footsteps fading down the hallway. She stood there long after he was gone, holding the item in her hands. The lie was no longer hers to carry. But the test was far from over, because the next time, the truth would not be asked for quietly in an empty hallway. It would be demanded in front of everyone. The review happened on a Thursday, the kind of Thursday that felt heavier than the others, where the air in the office seemed to press down on everyone at once. Emails slowed, conversations softened. People sat straighter in their chairs, aware that attention was about to land somewhere, and hoping it would not be on them. She arrived early, as she always did now. The conference room lights were already on. A long table filled the space, polished and unforgiving. At the front of the room, a screen waited, blank for the moment, but soon to display numbers that would speak louder than excuses ever could. She took a seat near the middle, close enough to be seen, not close enough to feel exposed. At least, that was what she told herself. The item was in her bag. She had almost left it at home that morning, almost convinced herself that carrying it again was unnecessary, dangerous. But something inside her refused to put it away. It was a reminder now, not of fear, but of a choice she had already made once. The room filled slowly. Executives, managers, analysts, people whose opinions shaped careers without them ever realizing it. When he entered, the noise faded immediately. The chief executive officer took his place at the head of the table. His expression was calm, as always. He did not rush. He did not need to. "We are here to review discrepancies found during our internal audit," he said evenly. Not to assign blame, but to understand decisions. The words sounded fair, reasonable, but everyone knew better than to underestimate a moment like this. The presentation began. Slides changed. Numbers appeared. Questions were asked. Most were answered carefully, with language designed to protect more than explain. Then, her name appeared on the screen. A small data inconsistency, minor on paper. The kind of thing that could be blamed on a system delay or a shared responsibility. The kind of thing people explained away every day. The room went quiet. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest. The old instinct rose immediately. Stay small. Let it pass. Say as little as possible. She remembered the hallway. She remembered his voice asking a simple question. She raised her hand. "I want to address that," she said. All eyes turned toward her. She stood, legs steady even though her pulse was not. "The discrepancy was my responsibility. I noticed it late, and I chose to correct it without escalating it. That was a mistake." A few people shifted uncomfortably. This was not how these moments usually went. She continued. "The data itself did not cause harm, but the decision to handle it quietly could have. I should have reported it immediately." Silence followed. Thick, expectant. She did not look at him. She did not need to. When he spoke, his voice did not rise. "Thank you for your honesty," he said. "That choice matters more than the error itself." He turned to the room. "This is what accountability looks like, not perfection, responsibility." The meeting moved on, but something had already settled. Afterward, as people gathered their things and filtered out in low voices, she remained seated for a moment, letting the weight lift slowly from her shoulders. She had not known what the outcome would be, only that she could not lie again. He approached her as the room emptied. "You did what many would not," he said quietly. She nodded. I learned the cost of hiding. He glanced at her bag. Some lessons leave marks. Yes, she replied, but they also leave direction. He paused, then smiled faintly. You are being considered for a larger role. Nothing final yet, but today mattered. Her breath caught. Thank you, she said. As he walked away, she finally allowed herself to sit back. The truth had not punished her. It had positioned her, and for the first time, she understood that the real test had never been about the item, or the lie, or even the job. It had been about who she chose to be when the cost was real, and that choice was now visible to everyone. The change did not happen overnight. After the review, nothing dramatic followed. No public announcement, no sudden promotion, no whispered congratulations in the hallways. On the surface, everything returned to normal. Meetings continued. Deadlines arrived and passed. People focused on their own work, just as they always had. But for her, the atmosphere felt different. She was included in conversations that once happened without her, asked for input before decisions were made, not after. When questions came up, eyes turned toward her more often than she expected. Not because of sympathy, not because of obligation, because her judgment had proven steady when pressure was real. She did not mistake this for kindness. She understood what it was. Trust. One afternoon, a few weeks later, an email appeared in her inbox with no subject line. It was brief. Please come to my office at 4:30. No explanation, no tone to read between the lines. She stared at the screen for a long moment before responding. Her heart beat faster, but it was not panic this time. It was awareness. This was not a test sprung on her. This was an invitation. At 4:28, she stood outside his office door. The glass walls revealed a room that was simple, organized, and quiet. No excess, no display of power, just clarity. Come in, he said before she knocked. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. He gestured for her to sit. Then he leaned back slightly, folding his hands as he looked at her. Not like a boss evaluating an employee, like someone weighing a decision that mattered. I want to talk about where you see yourself, he said. She hesitated, then answered honestly. I want to build something stable, something that does not depend on fear. He nodded. That is why I called you here. He turned a folder on his desk and slid it toward her. Inside was a proposal. Not a promotion in the traditional sense, but a role created specifically to bridge teams that did not usually communicate. A role that required judgment, discretion, and credibility. I need someone who understands pressure from both sides, he said. Someone who knows what it feels like to have very little and still choose integrity. Her eyes stayed on the page, but her thoughts raced. You are not offering this because I told the truth once, she said carefully. No, he replied. I am offering it because you told the truth when it cost you something. She closed the folder gently. And if I say no? Then nothing changes, he said. But if you say yes, people will question you. They will watch you closely. You will not be protected. She met his gaze. I would rather be tested than invisible. A faint smile crossed his face. That is what I hoped you would say. As she left his office, the building felt the same, but she did not. The item was still in her bag. She had kept it there deliberately, not as a reminder of fear anymore, but as proof of distance traveled. That evening, as she walked through the hallway where everything had begun, she slowed her steps. She remembered standing there, heart racing, choosing the easier answer. She understood now that the lie had not defined her. The choice that followed it had. And somewhere between fear and honesty, between hiding and standing still, she had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Not because someone had given her permission, but because she had finally given it to herself. The new role changed the rhythm of her days. Her calendar filled with meetings that used to happen behind closed doors. Conversations shifted from surface-level updates to real decisions, the kind that carried consequences. She listened more than she spoke, learning how power moved through silence as much as words. Not everyone welcomed her presence. She felt it in the pauses when she entered a room, in the way certain managers stopped mid-sentence and recalculated, in the polite smiles that never reached their eyes. She understood why. She was new to this level, and she had not arrived through the usual channels. She had arrived through trust. One afternoon, while reviewing reports late into the evening, she noticed something that did not sit right. a pattern hidden beneath clean spreadsheets and confident summaries, numbers that balanced too perfectly, decisions that seemed efficient on paper but costly everywhere else. She checked again, then a third time. It was not an accident. The findings pointed toward a senior manager whose influence reached far beyond her department. Someone respected, someone protected by years of results and relationships, someone who would not appreciate being questioned by her. She closed her laptop and sat back, the familiar weight returning to her chest. This was the moment she had been warned about. No one was asking her to speak. No one would blame her for staying silent. Bringing this forward would complicate things. It would draw attention she could not control. It would invite scrutiny not just of the data, but of her. She thought about the hallway again, how small the lie had seemed, how large it had become. The next morning, she requested a private meeting with the chief executive officer. He listened without interrupting as she laid out what she had found. Her voice stayed even, her hands rested flat on the table. She did not exaggerate. She did not soften the truth either. When she finished, the room remained quiet. "This will not be easy," he said finally. "I know," she replied. "If you proceed, you will face resistance," he continued, "and not all of it will be professional." "I know that too," she said, "but if I do not proceed, then the role means nothing." He studied her for a long moment, then he nodded. "Prepare your findings," he said. "We will address this publicly." The word landed heavily. Publicly meant exposure. Publicly meant no protection. Publicly meant that her integrity would be tested in front of everyone who doubted her place. As the day of the review approached, the tension grew. Whispers traveled faster than emails. Meetings ended abruptly when she walked in. She felt eyes on her back in the hallways. She was not imagining it. The senior manager requested a meeting. She declined. The night before the review, she stayed late, sitting alone in the same break room where everything had shifted weeks ago. The item rested in her bag, worn now from being carried everywhere. She held it in her hands, grounding herself in its weight. She had once lied to protect herself. Tomorrow, the truth would do the opposite. When the meeting began, the room was full. Executives, directors, observers. The atmosphere was tight, expectant. The chief executive officer opened the session with measured calm, then nodded to her. She stood. Her presentation was clear, direct, supported by evidence that spoke for itself. She did not accuse. She explained. She did not raise her voice. She let the facts carry the weight. The senior manager interrupted her once. She paused, then continued. He interrupted again. This time, the room shifted. When she finished, silence followed. The chief executive officer spoke. "We will investigate these findings fully," he said, "and we will do so transparently." He turned to her. "Thank you for bringing this forward." She sat down slowly, pulse loud in her ears. She did not know how this would end, but she knew, without question, that there was no longer any version of herself that would choose silence over truth. The test had moved beyond her, and now everyone was watching. The days after the review were the hardest she had faced since joining the company. The investigation moved forward quietly, but its presence was everywhere. Meetings were postponed without explanation. Emails were copied to legal teams she had never interacted with before. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms, then resumed in softer tones once she passed. No one confronted her directly. That made it worse. She felt the resistance in subtler ways. A request for data that went unanswered. A calendar invite removed without comment. A project she had been leading quietly, reassigned to someone else, temporarily. Each change was small enough to deny. Together, they formed a message she could not ignore. You went too far. One evening, as she packed her bag to leave, she found an envelope on her desk. No name, no return address. Inside was a single printed page. It listed past mistakes from her early career. Old employers, short tenures, moments she had worked hard to leave behind. At the bottom, one sentence. People like you do not last long here. Her hands trembled as she folded the paper. The familiar fear returned, sharper than before. This was what silence had once protected her from. Exposure, judgment, being reduced to fragments of a past she had survived, not chosen. She considered walking away. No one would blame her. The pressure was intense. The message was clear. She could protect herself again by stepping back, by letting the investigation continue without her voice attached to it. She requested a meeting with the chief executive officer. When she entered his office, he was standing by the window, city lights reflecting faintly against the glass. He turned as she approached, his expression serious. "They are pushing back," he said before she could speak. "Yes," she replied. "I expected that." He gestured for her to sit. "You need to understand what this costs," he continued. "Not just to the company, to you." She met his gaze. "I already do." She told him about the envelope, about the way her access was shrinking, about the quiet attempts to isolate her without leaving a record. When she finished, the room was silent. "This is the moment most people retreat," he said, "not because they are wrong, but because they are tired." She nodded. "I am tired." "Then I will be clear," he said. "You can step away from this process if you choose. I will not hold it against you." She took a breath. The offer was real. So was the relief it promised. "And if I stay?" she asked. "Then the outcome will be public," he said, "for everyone involved, including you." She thought of the hallway again, the lie, the fear, the choice she had made since then, again and again. "I will stay," she said. He nodded once. "Then you will not stand alone." The following week, the findings were released. The senior manager was placed on leave pending further action. Policies were revised. Oversight structures changed. The announcement was formal, careful, and impossible to misinterpret. The reaction was immediate. Some people avoided her entirely. Others offered quiet nods of respect. A few stopped by her desk with brief words of support, spoken softly, as if afraid to be overheard. She accepted all of it. One evening, as she walked through the hallway where everything had begun, she slowed. The building was nearly empty. The lights dimmed. Her footsteps echoed softly. She reached into her bag and held the item for a moment. It no longer felt heavy. The truth had cost her comfort. It had stripped away illusions. It had made her visible in ways she could not control. But it had also clarified something she had never fully understood before. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to stop letting fear decide who she was. And whatever came next, she knew one thing with certainty. She would never choose silence again. The weeks that followed felt quieter, but heavier in meaning. The company adjusted, processes changed, oversight tightened. On the surface, it looked like a standard corporate correction. Internally, it was something else entirely. A line had been drawn, and everyone knew who had drawn it. She returned to her work with steady focus, no longer questioning whether she belonged in the rooms she entered. The resistance had not disappeared, but it had shifted. Fewer subtle barriers, fewer silent exclusions. Not because everyone agreed with her actions, but because the outcome had spoken clearly. Integrity had won. One afternoon, she was asked to attend a small off-site meeting. Nothing formal, no board members, just a handful of department heads and the chief executive officer. The setting was understated, a quiet conference space away from the main building, chosen deliberately. The discussion was not about numbers. It was about people. "How do we prevent this from happening again?" someone asked. Silence followed. She waited, then spoke. "By making it safe to speak early," she said, "not when the damage is visible, before." The room shifted. She explained how fear delayed truth, how small decisions compounded when people believed honesty would cost them their place. She did not accuse anyone. She described a system she had lived inside. The chief executive officer listened without interrupting. When the meeting ended, he asked her to stay behind. The room emptied. Chairs slid back into place. The door closed softly. "You changed the way they think," he said. "I only said what I experienced," she replied. "That is exactly why it mattered," he said. He sat across from her, no desk between them this time. Not as a superior, but as someone finally speaking plainly. "There is something else I want you to consider," he continued. "I am forming a long-term initiative focused on internal accountability and mentorship. It will require visibility, trust, and someone who understands the cost of truth." She did not answer immediately. "This is not about reward," he added. "It is about alignment." She looked down at her hands, then back up. "And if I fail? Then we learn," he said. "That is the difference now." She nodded slowly. Later that evening, as she walked through the familiar hallway, she noticed how different it felt. Not because the space had changed, but because she had. She no longer walked with her shoulders drawn in. She no longer scanned the floor in fear of what might fall. She stopped where the item had once slipped from her bag. She took it out now, holding it openly. It had become worn with time, edges softened by use. Once, it had been something she hid. Now, it was simply part of her story. The next morning, she accepted the role. The announcement was brief, professional, carefully worded, but the effect was immediate. Messages of support arrived quietly, some from unexpected places, others from people who had been waiting for permission to speak. She responded to each one thoughtfully. Late that day, she received a final message from him. "Thank you for choosing to stay," it read. She paused before replying. "Thank you for giving me the space to choose," she wrote back. As she shut down her computer and gathered her things, she understood something with surprising clarity. This had never been about a single lie or a single truth. It had been about whether the system could change when one person refused to disappear. And it had. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to matter. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that the future would not require her to hide any part of who she was. The announcement settled into the company slowly, like dust after a long storm. There were no banners, no speeches, no celebration that marked a clear ending. Instead, there was a quiet shift in how people moved through the halls, how meetings opened, how questions were asked. Small changes, almost invisible to anyone who was not paying attention. She noticed them all. People spoke earlier now, not louder, but sooner. Issues surfaced before they grew sharp edges. Mistakes were named without panic. Responsibility moved closer to the moment it mattered. Her role grew into its shape. Some days were difficult. Some conversations ended without resolution. Not everyone trusted the process. Not everyone trusted her. She did not expect them to. Trust, she had learned, was not demanded. It was earned, repeatedly, often without thanks. Late one evening, as she prepared to leave, she passed the hallway where everything had begun. The lights were dimmed. The building was nearly empty. The quiet no longer felt threatening. It felt earned. She stopped where she had once frozen, heart racing, searching for the safest answer. She reached into her bag and took out the item. It had traveled with her through every phase of the story, from fear to reminder to resolve. She held it for a moment, then placed it carefully back inside. She no longer needed to look at it to remember. Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned to see him walking toward her, jacket over his arm, expression calm as always. "You stayed," he said. "So did you," she replied. They stood there for a moment, not as chief executive officer and employee, but as two people who understood the cost of decisions made quietly. "You know," he said, "I have seen many talented people fail here, not because they lacked skill, but because they learned too early that silence felt safer than truth." She nodded. "I almost became one of them." "But you did not," he said. "You chose differently." She looked down the hallway, then back at him. "You gave me the space to do that." He shook his head slightly. "I gave you a question. You answered it." They walked toward the exit together, steps unhurried. Outside, the night air was cool. The city moved steadily around them, unaware of the quiet transformation that had taken place inside a single building. As they parted ways, she felt something settle inside her. Not pride, not relief, something steadier, clarity. The next morning, she arrived at work as she always did, early, focused, present. But she no longer carried the tension that had once shaped every step. She greeted colleagues without scanning their faces for judgment. She entered meetings without rehearsing defenses. She spoke when she had something to say, and listened when she did not. The system was not perfect. It never would be, but it was better than it had been. And she had helped make it so, not through ambition or defiance, but through a series of choices made when no one was watching. The story did not end with applause or romance or sudden fortune. It ended with something quieter and far more lasting. A woman who no longer needed to hide. A leader who understood that power revealed character by how it tested others. And a truth that stood on its own, without fear. Because in the end, the smallest moments had carried the greatest weight. A question asked calmly in a hallway. An answer chosen under pressure. And the courage to live with what followed. Thank you for listening to this story. If it resonated with you, consider what choice you would make when honesty feels risky. And remember, real change often begins in moments so ordinary that no one thinks they matter. Until next time.